Well, thank you, and thank you guys all for attending. As it was said, my name is Ben Tice, owner and director of School Marketing. School Marketing, we've been around now for 11 years, and prior to that, my experience along with my business partner was working 2 years at Google. But my favorite part of my job, beside obviously offering services like web development, SEO, SEM, social media, all that kind of stuff that we do at School Marketing, is being able to partner with great organizations like SCORE and put on these educational workshops so that you can understand, obviously, again, how this stuff kind of works, how digital marketing is all kind of connected, what you would need to do if you're doing this internally, or if you're hiring somebody else, either, internally as an employee or externally as like an agency, that to kind of know some of the questions to ask and what they're essentially kind of doing. So with that said, today we're going to be talking about SEO. Before we kind of get started, just as it was said before, please put, again, any of your comments or questions in the chat. I will get to those at the end, just because most often we do answer those questions as they kind of come about there. But please ask questions. That's what we're kind of here to kind of do. And it is being recorded, and you guys will get a copy of this so that you can obviously take notes and do all that kind of stuff. But you'll get a copy of this so that you can reference at a later point. So today we're going to be talking about growing your business with SEO and Google. Really understanding search engine optimization and how you can use the power of Google and really even just the internet as a whole to start to enhance your online presence and ultimately your business overall. So the first thing is just basically understanding what we're kind of talking about here today. So we're talking about SEO, or search engine optimization. The basic terms to really kind of do is, if you flip that term in on itself, what we're trying to do is we're trying to optimize our search engine presence. Really understanding how Google, Ask, Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, all these other search engines out there, how they essentially are reading your websites and how they want to read your websites to understand who you are, what you do, essentially the value that you're bringing to their potential users. And if we know that information, we can obviously construct our online presence to appease them and to make it easier for them. Really, what we're doing is we're trying to build a long-term business relationship with Google or other kind of search engines. If you were to walk away with one thing, that's the analogy and that's the phrasing I want you to kind of remember. SEO is like building a long-term relationship with Google. You're probably going to hear me say that a couple times throughout this presentation because it's super important, and it's how we essentially can kind of learn and relate to what Google's looking for, how they like to build that relationship up, and what to essentially kind of do to create and nurture that relationship. Throughout the presentation, then we'll talk about the things that are going to be related to that relationship with Google and SEO. The content on your website, the social media. We're not going to get into what social media account or platform is best for you or how to get more likes. We're going to talk a little bit more though about how it's actually connected to SEO and how it can actually benefit your relationship. The mobile devices versus desktop we'll get into, and even just some free Google tools, and then ultimately paid advertising, just again, how that's related to SEO. So another thing I like to kind of just quickly kind of discuss is, again, the search anatomy. We're using Google here as an example, but pretty much every search engine that you're going to kind of come encounter with is going to, have these, 4 to 5 kind of main kind of components. The first is a search query. So anything you search for, if you type a single letter, a full sentence, if you speak into using Siri or Google Assist, your speaker, into your, again, your desktop to your phone, whatever it may be, whatever you search for and click enter, that's going to be your search query. Usually then you're going to see approximately these 4 different kind of components. We have our paid ads at the top, which is going to be kind of like Google Ads. We have our local listings, which is obviously going to be just looking at your local searches or how they're related to businesses locally. Organic search results, purely related to SEO and what search results would be best for whatever your search query is. And then last but not least is your knowledge graph or ID card. That's usually like a visual representation of a company that kind of has more information, again, obviously, and more of a visual representation. So these are going to be, mainly the 5 kind of components. We're going to mainly talk about Google here today, but here's a couple things to kind of know. The reason we're talking about Google is because it is the largest search engine in the world. It also, again, has a very large percentage of market share. A lot of times, even around here in Minnesota, we're talking anywhere from like 85 to 95% market share for most businesses we deal with. And when I say market share, what that means is traffic coming from just the overarching term search engines means that approximately 85 to 95% of that traffic is coming from Google. So it doesn't mean that we don't want to disregard the other, again, 5 to 15%. It's just being realistic on a couple things. One is Google is just so huge with traffic, especially here locally, that we want to be able to respect that and obviously harness that power. The other kind of component to also realize too is a lot of the other search engines have kind of conceded to Google, knowing that, hey, they are the industry experts, they're kind of the trailblazers. And here's kind of the beauty of it is if we focus on Google, and again, it will essentially have a ripple effect to the other search engines. So we don't necessarily need a search strategy for just Google, just Bing, just Yahoo, etc. We can essentially kind of focus on Google, and a lot of that stuff will ripple out to the other ones. Now, it's also important to kind of realize when it comes to SEO, there are 3 different types of SEO, and they're done in 2 different phases. So the first type of SEO is called back-end optimization. This is the one that most people relate to when they hear the word SEO. This is kind of the coding and the settings and some of the different plugins behind the scenes. Everything is behind the scenes here with back-end optimization, and this is the one that usually is a little bit more technical than any of the others. We also have front-end optimization. Everything that you can kind of touch, feel, and see on a website is what front-end optimization is going to be. So obviously the words and the content and the pages on your site, but also the pictures, the video, even some of the user experience. Again, anything that a user can experience on your site and engage with, that is going to be front-end optimization. And then last but not least is going to be offsite optimization. Offsite optimization is going to be dealing with all of the platforms that are not your website, but are pointing to it. So to give you some examples, your social media accounts, your local listings, either your, again, on Bing Maps, on Google Maps, maybe your Better Business Bureau listing, maybe it's, BNI, whatever it may be, all those other organizations out there, is it's having a profile on them and then pointing to it, and even your YouTube channel as well. So you can kind of see that 2/3 of this is obviously dealing with your actual website, but a whole third is also dealing with something that's not even your website and all of these platforms that would be pointing to your website from there. So those are going to be the 3 different types of SEO that we're essentially kind of dealing with. And then they're done in 2 different phases. So the first phase is more of a one-time type of phase. Now, this can be done either if you're rebuilding a site at the beginning, or the analogy I kind of use is if you already have a website built, it doesn't matter if it was a year old, 5 years, 10, 20 years old. What we're essentially doing from an analogy standpoint is you can lift your house up and redo the foundation and then put your house down, your house being your website in this analogy. So foundational SEO, what this essentially does is this lays the foundation to your relationship with Google. What that means is we're essentially communicating to Google what we do, where we do it, and who we do it for. It's really making sure that Google understands the what, where, and who of your business so that they can understand, again, that information about your business so that then you can move into relational ongoing SEO and start building that relationship with Google so that we can answer the why you should be, essentially ranked higher and picked over your other kind of competition. And so you can kind of see it's very similar. Why I use the analogy of it's a business relationship with Google is if you went to a networking meeting and you're just meeting someone for the first time and you try to be their best friend, it's probably not going to work out. Relationships don't work that way. And the same thing here with Google. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is they essentially are trying to be Google's best friend when they haven't set their foundation. And so, again, we need to make sure that we're setting that what, where, and who. We'll get into a little bit of that here as we get going of how we kind of do that. A lot of that is dealing with the initial content on your website and the initial kind of like back-end settings and meta titles and tag or descriptions and alt tags and all these other kind of things that need to be done correctly once, but need to be done in that kind of manner. And so again, we'll kind of go through that, but that is the biggest mistake that a lot of times we see when people are looking to kind of do that. At the end of the day, it's also kind of thinking about that we want to make Google look like a rock star. And what I mean by that is that when you as a user go onto Google and you search for, best house painter near me, Google is the one that's essentially leading you to that example. So they may pick your company. John X is looking for the best painter in Minneapolis. He finds your company called, again, Black Door Painting, and, again, chooses you. Well, again, you're the one that actually did solved his problem and did the service, but Google's the one that facilitated that. So the idea and the methodology here is that if we essentially think that every time we create a new page, every time we try to create more of a relationship with Google, we're making them look like a rock star because they're able to point users to us and we're essentially benefiting from it. So just something to kind of think about as why we want to know, obviously, how Google looks at this is because it can obviously help us from that kind of perspective. So now getting into a little bit of, again, how we actually start with SEO and where we're going to start on your website. And a lot of this starts with foundational SEO. So a lot of times what I tell people is take the current services, offerings, products, or content on your website and start to go through that. That's essentially what foundational SEO is. And then we'll kind of talk about how we can kind of do that on an ongoing basis to enhance relational or ongoing. Again, really at the end of the day, beyond just remembering that SEO is a long-term business relationship with Google, the other thing to remember is this is all revolving around content. Now, content isn't always just written words. Now, again, there are videos, there are pictures, infographics, social media posts. There's a lot of different ways that we can make content, but it starts with content. And even more so than that, it does start with the written words on your website. It's important to understand how Google actually reads the content on your website. So essentially, Google uses what's called a spider technique. They send out little bots, they scan kind of websites, and what they're essentially trying to do is they're reading that using their technology then to kind of glean the information and the who, what, and where from that content. So again, they know, and you can essentially build a relationship up with them. So they know, again, what you do, where you do it, and who you do it for. So knowing that, a lot of times when we work with clients, they don't have enough content to essentially start, again, that adequate relationship with Google. So a lot of times we take people through a simple exercise where, I tell people, let's start listing out your demographics. Let's start listing out your services or products or product categories. Let's start listing out our geographics. Then essentially what we're kind of doing here is we're essentially creating keyword lists. We can kind of blend those 3 lists or 2 lists, depending on what you have there. Again, those 2 or 3 lists essentially kind of together. And what we're doing is we're coming up with kind of what we call core keywords. What are the essence of, again, this content that we're going to communicate to Google? What is the essence of this? And how are we going to kind of construct this content to communicate to Google, this is the service that we do, or this is what we sell, this is who it's for, this is geographically who it's for. Now, again, you could just take those lists like that, blend them together, and then start kind of creating content around them. I will say it's probably not the most efficient way, especially with technology today. And so what I usually like to kind of recommend is going through that simple exercise of listing out those that you see there in the bullet points. And then, again, also adding just any phrases or services right away that you're like, hey, I want to rank for that. Obviously, all of us here, if I were to ask you, hey, list 5 keywords or phrases or search queries, really at the end of the day is what we're talking about. List search 5 queries that you want to rank for. Great. Now, the reason that we want to validate these or discover new keywords is because what you think you want to rank for obviously has some validity. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to understand is we have a product or a service over here, and we need to figure out what people are searching for in order to essentially get to us. And again, you might have the exact answer to that, but I will say almost every time that we do this with a client, we find a variation or a different type of keyword that we can prove that people are searching for that's related to your product, service, again, business as a whole that you may not have thought about. So that's why a lot of times we want to take that list and that exercise after you're done making that list and then utilize, the 2 tools that I recommend are one of them is called Moz, M-O-Z, and the other one is called SEMrush. Now, both of these do have what's called a freemium model, which means you can get a little bit for free and you can do a little bit of keyword research, but you're most likely going to have to pay for these. But I will say it's definitely well worth your money and it's very affordable. But essentially what these softwares will do for you is you can put these lists and that information that we just, again, took time writing out, and it will blend them together. It will essentially tell you a few things. It'll validate, again, like, yep, you guys are correct. Those are great keywords. That's going to bring some traffic to the site. Also, hey, have you ever thought about these keywords? Knowing what you're kind of going for, we found some data to show you that you might want to consider these keywords as well. And last but not least is which keywords you pick. Here's the competitiveness of those, because that's obviously key. Because you have to remember, when you're trying to create a business relationship with Google, you most likely have dozens upon dozens of other people that are trying to create that same relationship. So how do we stick out? How do we, again, kind of do that? It starts with understanding opportunity and, again, then implementing that opportunity. And what I mean by opportunity is, again, we might discover some more keywords that we weren't thinking about before that maybe have a low competition level. And so again, if we also use that analogy again of having that long-term business relationship with Google, it's okay to maybe start with some of those keywords that are less competitive. We're not only getting some ranking with those, but we're also building that relationship up with Google. So it's easier for us then to come to knock on Google's door and say, hey, we're ready now to be in the conversation of those highly competitive ones, because we've been building the relationship with some of these smaller ones for you. And so once we have those keywords, it's about, again, kind of creating content. Now, the three buzzwords that I like just to have people remember when you're creating content is unique, natural, and relevant. So it's really just basic. It's saying, hey, don't just copy and paste. You have to write this content yourself. Now, again, you can utilize tools out there. You can utilize people out there to kind of help you recreate that content. Also, you want to make sure that it has a natural tone. Believe it or not, if you just start stuffing keywords into content, Google can now identify that with technology and actually devalue some of those. So a good rule of thumb is, if you write a page of content, if you couldn't feel comfortable, standing up and, in front of your peers or reading this to your colleague and, not sounding the best with it, then you probably shouldn't be utilizing that content. So you should be able to feel comfortable printing off that, that content and reading it aloud and sounding intelligent and sounding natural. And then also, of course, we want it to be relevant content. This a lot of times has more to do with that ongoing relational, meaning adding more blogs, talking about topics that are relevant, what's happening in your industry, the world, however your products or services are connected to those things. But we also want to make sure that it's relevant. So a good place to kind of start is, again, when we have the keyword list and everything like that, is focusing on your main services and products. Another good rule of thumb is that every main product or service that you have should have its own page. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make, and I see this all the time on small business websites, is I go to their services and I just see a bullet point list of just their services. Now, again, you have to remember what that looks like to Google. You're essentially, again, we're using content to communicate the importance of what we do and why you should be picked above others. If you're essentially saying to Google, hey, here is, again, what I do, and it's only in bullet points, if you're only giving them a few words, that isn't very, sufficient. Sorry about that. And so you just have to remember that we're using the content to be able to communicate that importance. And again, what you do, where you do it, and who you do it for. So you absolutely need a page on its own to be able to, again, communicate that kind of to Google. Sarah, I apologize. I have just a tickle in my throat. And so one thing to kind of remember too is it is okay to have one service page that lists all your services, but even just having a read more to kind of go along with there. And I'll give you another example of why this is so important. Even if you told me, well, Ben, I don't have bullet points. I actually have, 2 or 3 paragraphs per service just on my one page. That's still great. But here, again, that's great to start with, but it's still not enough, because this is what happens. Say you are a, again, lawn care service. So you do lawn care, you do, again, irrigation, you do fall cleanup, and you also do snow removal. If you have one page that just lists all of those services, and even if they speak really well, this is what happens. Someone in December here in Minnesota searches for snow removal near me. What Google does is they go, hey, I've got a search for you to this company, which is you guys, that, again, the business owner, but it only matches 25% of what they're telling me on that page. Whereas if you were the business owner, took that paragraph, that, again, that snow removal, and made it its own page, Google goes, hey, searcher here, user on Google, I've got a solution for you, and it's 100% relevant because the whole page is, again, done in that way. So it's really important to kind of have those service pages and those products there to be able to kind of communicate that to Google. And that's why it's so important to really start with keyword research, and you're going to get a good idea of your main services, your main demographics, your main geographics, everything like that. So that's where we really kind of want to start. Then, again, blogs are a great way. That's a perfect way for ongoing or relational SEO. Service pages and products, that's mainly going to be kind of a foundational SEO piece, because again, once those are set, they're pretty much kind of set. Now, obviously, if you add more products, you add more services, of course, you'll do the same kind of thing. But that's part of that foundational piece. Blogs would be an instance of, again, making sure this is a way that you can kind of continuously, do more content. One little tip I give for people that a lot of times get tripped up and go, well, Ben, I don't know what I should write for on blogs. I don't know where to start. I don't know what's, again, relevant, whatever. I say, hey, start with a question and answer it. So start with a question you get all the time, either, again, just in your business or you're getting asked all the time right now, and write a blog about it. Give an example at School Marketing. You can imagine we get a lot of questions about artificial intelligence and AI. Well, that's what we're writing blogs about right now to, again, ask those questions and then kind of answer them. So that's just an example in our industry, and everybody has topical, either questions or, situations in their business that they can be writing about. And a reminder that it's more than just words. I kind of mentioned this previously. We're talking about pictures and videos, which are, again, super critical. We're going to talk about here. Infographics, social media posts, all of these things are quote unquote content. Now we want to make sure that, we want to prioritize the website that you have, but we can also supplement on those other platforms with some of that other types of content as well, utilizing some of the keyword research that we've done, utilizing some of the service pages and product pages and blogs that we've also created as well. So I kind of alluded to this just, 10 seconds ago, but another key one is video. You absolutely should be doing some type of video or have some type of video related to your business. A few reasons why. One is it's one of the most powerful SEO tools you'll be able to have is creating video content. Also, studies have actually shown, just from a marketing standpoint, that 2/3 of people nowadays would rather watch a video than read a web page. So it's super critical here. Not only is it a great SEO tool, and part of that's because Google knows that people want video, so they're going to put that user experience or that user data into their search engine and their algorithm. And we can also take advantage of that. But also from a marketing standpoint, if we know that 2/3 of a population prefer something, we absolutely should be creating a video that essentially speaks the same type of message that might be on some of your pages. Obviously, some of the other basic, again, stuff, make sure your website's kept up to date, not only with plugin updates and stuff like that, but also relevant content. Then we also have user experience. Here's kind of the thing is it's a little bit of an unknown kind of variable here. And what I mean by that is there actually are user experience kind of data points or, again, elements within the Google algorithm on how things are kind of ranked. We just don't know all about them or how they're quantified because some of them are qualitative. And obviously some of them can be subjective. What you maybe like on a website, I maybe don't. But there are some basic ones. And usually what I kind of tell people is start with like, do you like the site experience? Do your friends or your colleagues, do they understand when they get to a website, what you do, where you do it, who you do it for? Can they get in if they're looking for one of your services? Is it easy for them to kind of navigate? That's what we call a user path. If going back to that, lawn care person, if someone's looking for snow removal, can they easily go through your site? If they're looking for irrigation, can they easily kind of find that? Yes, you can prioritize services, but you need to make sure that we're accounting for all user paths, different types of users, either geographic or demographic, that are looking for different services and products, and make sure they can get into your site. Also making sure that your website's, again, not clunky, not slow, doesn't have things broken or overlapping on each other on mobile devices or desktop. Some of that's going to be more of your basic kind of things. Also, it's important to know Hummingbird update came out, I think now we're going on maybe 8 years or so. But I always like to kind of tell people, again, to give you a little bit more insight of how Google works. So the Hummingbird update is essentially what Google's doing is they're doing a micro search within your search query that you do. why that's important to understand. It essentially helps you with synonyms and things like that. So we don't need to be so literal with keywords. We're really going after the meaning. So the example that I always say is if I were to hold up, if you guys can see my video, and I were to hold up like this clicker and said, hey guys, why don't you guys do a search for this? If we have, 20 people in the room, most likely we're probably gonna have 15 to 20 different results. Someone might use the word clicker, someone might use the word remote, someone might use the word, again, black TV, again, remote device. The idea here is that we're all searching for the exact same thing, but just because of our personal preferences, we might be doing them in using different words. That's what the Hummingbird update essentially tries to correct, or just, again, help you as a business and Google out better. Is they're just trying to understand what you would essentially be meaning with that, so that the search results match more of that than just, matching the keywords. Now, Google still uses those keywords and does match those on pages, but it's not as, again, night and day and cut and dry as it used to be. That's really how Google search used to work, is whatever those words were in there, we just find those on a page and match them. Like we just said, that's not so sophisticated, and not as sophisticated as it can be. And that's something why Hummingbird update was done. So again, it goes back to why we do some of those exercises. Yes, we want enough kind of content, and we want enough kind of, again, meaning behind there, but it does help us knowing that, like the big one too is like if you have an S at the end of your keyword or not. That used to be a big thing in SEO, is you almost had to have two different, you had to make sure you went after both keywords. Well, that kind of little stuff along with some bigger stuff gets kind of lumped up in the Hummingbird update and gets kind of corrected. More of just a PSA announcement with SSL. SSL is if you ever see HTTPS on a site, or the little padlock next to, sometimes it's green or gray, next to your domain at the top of your web page on any browser. Really, this is important, is Google instituted several years ago that they want every website to have an SSL. It kind of protects the user's information on your site. But it's just one of those things just to make sure of, if you ever see that your website doesn't have those, sometimes it will show up as an X, sometimes it will say the words not secure. There's a couple different ways that you might see if you have an SSL or not. It's just more of a PSA announcement because it's a super easy fix. Just go to your hosting company, wherever your website is built or hosted, and be able to talk to them about getting an SSL. Just something small, but you want to make sure that's taken care of. The other thing to note too is that SEO, again, since it is a long-term business relationship with Google, it is longer but stronger, meaning that it's going to take you time to get that relationship. You don't have, if I were to say, hey, name your top 3 business partnerships, your top 3 business referrals, your top 3 business friends, whatever it may be, I can guarantee you it didn't take a month for them to become that top one. It takes some time. It takes different touch points, and touch points could be, again, the service pages, the different, meta titles, the different images, the blog posts, the reviews, all these different kind of things that we can communicate to Google are touch points. And that's what kind of creates our relationship in that longer but stronger type of methodology. Now, one is looking at the future of SEO. Now, again, I told you I get a lot of questions, and have very recently, especially over the past couple months, been getting a lot of questions about artificial intelligence. Now, here's some things to kind of know. There are still so many unknowns about AI. So, again, when we start seeing things that like, hey, this is going to delete Google, this is going away, robots are going to take over the world, AI is going to, we're going to go into iRobot next year, the movie with Will Smith, those are getting ahead of themselves. And so it's also realizing that what, again, we're using AI for is right now, both Google and Bing specifically are using these tools and this technology to integrate into their search engines to essentially just be better. So yes, so search, again, like the search query, the search outline, again, how you engage with Bing or Google is definitely going to change. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to go to the wayside and we're never going to use Google again. But it is going to be kind of a change, because a lot of times instead of it being very transactional, which is what it is right now, input search query, get results. Here, again, with artificial intelligence and things that we've probably heard of and maybe experienced with the chat GPT, is it's most likely going to be a little bit more predictive or conversational. So again, it's still way too early to really kind of look at that, but it is important to obviously know that that's out there. Now, one thing that you could be utilizing right now is you could use, maybe some current AI tools, and there's way more than just ChatGPT out there. There are now plugins that are being utilized. again, that utilize ChatGPT, but, again, use it in a different fashion to help you write content, help you, again, analyze content, be predictive with trends and stuff like that. So what I would say right now is if you're worried about AI, don't be, again, like there's still a lot of unknowns. And yes, I know we've seen all the movies, we've talked about that, we've made all the jokes, but in the reality of it is right now is probably the sweetest spot we'll have with AI, meaning that we can use it to our benefit as a tool. And that's what I would, again, make sure that you take away with this is use AI as a tool. Look up some different kind of tools out there. If you want it to help you come up with some keywords, if you want it to use to help you to come up with some blog ideas, if you want it to help you, again, analyze some content, those are some things that you could look to kind of utilize. Now, again, AI isn't smart enough right now where you should just copy and paste and use it verbatim. Don't do that. But again, use it as a tool, use it as a reference point for that. We're also with the future seeing more integrations with social media as, again, platforms like Snapchat and TikTok and even just Instagram continually grow. It's, again, it's a lot easier for Google to have relationships like with Facebook and Twitter that are very just literal platforms. They have posts and tweets, there's content on them, bam, it's very easy to kind of see those connections. With some of these other ones like TikTok and, again, Snapchat and even Instagram with stories and whatnot, it gets a lot trickier because not only is it's more visual kind of content, but also it's kind of, cross-device content. And so when it's inside a mobile app and those types of things, it can make it trickier for Google. But what we're seeing though is Google and these kind of, again, different companies are trying to, have more relationships, more conversations. TikTok in itself is almost becoming somewhat of a search engine because people and different generations and different ages are going to that platform and kind of like YouTube is, again, searching for results that have video basis. So we're going to see some more just different types of integrations, growth and decline on different platforms from that. And then like we kind of talked about, this all goes into this authenticity, that user experience. So, again, there's going to continuously be different types of content on different devices. If it's a mobile app, if it's your website, if it's all those things, it doesn't mean any one of them is taking over. I remember, again, honestly, 11 years ago when I started the company, people were saying apps were going to, again, take over and your website was going to be obsolete. Honestly, it's farther from the truth. You still need a website because that's the hub and that's what you control. It's then using all these apps and all these other things to really kind of focus and push to more so your brand, which you control, which is kind of your website. So it just things kind of change and it's important to kind of realize, but these would be some of the things to kind of look out for or just keep your ears open as we start to progress and things start to change and we go into the future. I talked about YouTube and video a while. I'll just kind of briefly talk about, we have a whole other workshop that's just on YouTube and maximizing and optimizing your YouTube, again, channel, also creating videos and all that kind of stuff. I encourage you to check that out if that's of interest to you, which again, as we've talked about, it should be of interest for you if you want to take SEO seriously because we need video content and creation. But it is important to know that right now, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world and Google owns google.com and YouTube. So Google owns number one and number two. That's, again, why we focus so much on Google, but it is important to kind of know about that and just why video is so important. Again, with social media, I know we've kind of talked a little bit about social media. These are the 4 platforms right now that will give you the most benefit with SEO. That does not mean you should not be on other platforms that aren't listed here. TikTok absolutely can be very beneficial and powerful. Instagram can be very powerful. All the other platforms can be very powerful if they're. It's just talking about from a pure SEO standpoint, these are the 4 to kind of look at. So Google Plus was deprecated actually a few years ago, but I leave that one on here because essentially the idea of Google's version of Facebook, the posting idea, was essentially wrapped up into the Google My Business or Google Business Profile is what it's called now, but the Google Maps essentially. So now there is a posting feature on your Google Maps page, and that is beneficial. Also Facebook for your business page. Anything you post or whatever there is actually indexed by Google, which obviously can have a positive impact as you're creating more content using different keywords, et cetera, like that. Same thing with Twitter. And then ultimately with Pinterest, these can actually show up within Google Images. So if you have a very visual business, especially if you have a lot of products, this can be super powerful for you because it's another way to potentially get into Google Images and have people kind of find you. So again, we have a whole other workshop just on social media as well if you want to find out what platform is right for you, which ones we should do, everything like that. I encourage you kind of check out that presentation on those platforms. But there is an SEO value to being on some of these platforms and creating content and having that kind of connected with Google. So another thing that we also alluded to that's become super important is the impact of mobile. The biggest thing to know is that prior to about 2.5 years ago, Google would essentially index your desktop site first, so the user experience, the speed, everything like that, and then would do and essentially start ranking you, prioritizing that experience first, and then moving on to mobile. Well, now they've flip-flopped that. And the big key that sometimes this trips up, again, different business owners and marketing managers, is because we obviously build websites on a desktop, and most of the time as a business professional, we're accessing our website from a desktop and not always a mobile site. So it's super important that we need to stop and make sure that we've tested out our user experience on our mobile site and we've thought through this. So to give you some kind of an ideas on how you can increase user experience, you can use accordions or collapsible elements, meaning that instead of having 2 paragraph long, we might just have the 2 sentences with the button that says read more or the little plus, and then we expand it. Those are kind of ideas. Nobody wants to scroll for 6 pages when you do that. Remember, we have a lot less real estate here, screen real estate here than we do a desktop. So we have to, make sure that we're remembering that and integrating that into our user experience. Also, media. Make sure that your videos can play on mobile devices. Make sure that your pictures aren't too, large, that it accurately loads, that we don't have overlapping type of, different pieces of software. What happen a lot of times, especially if you're using WordPress, sometimes those, plugins or whatever that we're using or contact forms don't correctly lay out within on a website on a mobile device. It may look perfect on desktop, and you may not even think twice about looking on a mobile site. But you need to have a conversation either internally, externally with an agency or whatever, but you need to make sure that you're thinking about your user experience on your mobile device and being able to, again, make sure that that's adequately, configured and built. And also remember, you need to make sure that obviously having a mobile site, having a responsive website is 100% required. Again, it's very rare, I will say now in 2023, that we see a website that's not mobile friendly, but you cannot take SEO seriously unless you have a mobile friendly site. Now, some tools that we can utilize within Google and just overall too, the first one is local listings, especially if you have a local presence. Now, if you are an e-commerce or you're just kind of more of a nationwide or global company, local listings isn't really going to be for you. But if you are mainly either a service-based company or a product-based company that just deals with either if you have a brick and mortar store or don't, but you have kind of that local presence or your main, clientele is local, then local listings can be great. And I'm sure we've all experienced these now. It's the online yellow pages. It's the little red pin on the map on Google. There's Bing, there's Yelp. Those are the top 3 ones: Google, Bing, and Yelp. Some things to kind of know as we kind of talked about them. If you're on Google, which you absolutely need to be, if you have a brick and mortar or are servicing people locally here. Now, remember, you don't actually have to have a physical address. I usually get that question almost every presentation. You don't need to have a physical address. You can kind of do a service area and kind of hide your address, especially as sometimes people work from home or in different, shared office spaces. Google, I will say, does love to see an address, but it's not kind of required, and you can designate a service area. We can obviously do things like Google Posts, where we're actually like essentially doing Facebook posts, but on, Google's version of it. So, announcing things, posting blogs, all that kind of stuff, you can do that there. This is a great way, especially with Bing, Google, Yelp, and, even Facebook, to kind of do reputation management, getting reviews, taking care of those reviews, either positively or negatively, maybe even sharing some of those on your website or social media. That's another kind of, again, way to kind of go. When someone comes to me and says, hey, Ben, what's probably one of the easiest things that I can do to start my relationship up with Google? I tell them local listing. This is the easiest and quickest way to start that relationship so they can start to understand who you are, what you do, and where you do it. Now, one other thing too that's really important here, and both of these bullet points go together, is what's called NAP, name, address, phone. You want to try to make sure that your name, address, and phone is as consistent as possible online. Now, this a lot of times can get messed up if, you're moving around. We've had some, again, just inconsistencies, the way that we write our name, we write our phone number, whatever it may be. It's just a thing to put in the back of your mind that you always want NAP to be clean, name, address, phone. Now, you can use a tool like Moz Local or Yext is another one. And these can actually kind of help you, again, get out there and clean up some of that NAP if you've moved a couple of times and there. I encourage everyone to kind of check out or run a scan on there. You can go to Moz Local or Yext, they'll run a free scan and you can kind of see the health of your NAP, so to speak. And it might be something to kind of look into. But it can definitely help. Not only does it help Google, it also obviously helps your users and potential users because obviously they want to make sure that that information is correct as well and as clean as possible. Another tool, and now this is probably one of the only tools that we're kind of talking about within Google that doesn't actually help you rank better or your relationship up with Google, but it helps you understand your web presence and obviously what's happening. And this is where we can actually track our SEO efforts. Really, Google Analytics, another PSA announcement, everybody should have Google Analytics and you should make sure that it's running. One of the biggest mistakes is if we rebuild a site, if we weren't paying attention and the website goes down, what happens is Google cannot retroactively go get data. So if it stops running, if it breaks, whatever it may happen, is what happens is you just lose out on that data. There's no way to recover it. So make sure you have Google Analytics. Also right now is Google is moving from a classic analytics called Universal Analytics to what's called Google Analytics 4.0. We actually have some courses on both versions. Obviously, I encourage you to take advantage of the 4.0 courses because come June of this year, Google is going to be shutting off the recording aspect of classic or universal analytics. But really at the end of the day, Universal Analytics or Google Analytics 4.0, whichever version you're going to use, and eventually we'll all be using 4.0, this is going to be a platform where you're able to kind of see all the things that are kind of happening on your site. Who's coming to your site? Where are they coming from? What are they doing? We can set up conversions to see if they're doing what we want them to be doing, if that's purchasing or filling out contact forms, whatever that may be. Those are different types of things that we can essentially kind of get from Google Analytics. So super powerful tool. Everybody should be on that one. Same thing. Everybody should also be on Google Search Console. It's a great tool. We can submit our sitemaps. We can get some basic analytics. We can see how Google is seeing our site. Another big thing that we can get is alerts. There are two different types of alerts. We have warnings and errors. We get some warnings. Those are more suggestions from Google to say, hey, you might want to look at this thing. We saw this thing on your site and you might want to fix it or make it better. Warnings are, hey, we had this error happen on your site. You better fix this right now. Otherwise, that could impact our relationship between us, as in Google and you. So, and then there is some keyword data as well that we can get from Google Search Console. So, again, what's kind of nice about analytics, what's kind of nice about Search Console is the setup process and getting them going is really kind of a part of foundational SEO, meaning that once they're set up, they're good to go. Then ongoing relational SEO is using the data you get from these to essentially validate, again, what you're doing for SEO, for your website, for your online presence, or to find some shortcomings or opportunities or growth areas that we can obviously take note of, both positively and negative. And then last but not least, before we kind of start to wrap this up and I open it up for questions, is also looking at Google Ads. Now, again, running SEO or doing SEO and building a long-term relationship up with Google is going to help your Google Ads run better. Just doing ads is not going to improve your relationship with Google. It's a one-way street. Google at the end of the day is going to take the money if you do Google Ads, but if you have a better relationship with them, Google, again, will trust you more and you can see things that you might be able to get better rankings for the same amount of cost or a lower cost per click because Google trusts you over maybe another kind of competitor. Also, again, it just looks better to Google. Like, for instance, when we have more content pages, when we have more pages, like, for instance, specifically just for snow removal, just for irrigation, just for maybe different cities, one for Minneapolis, one for St. Paul, those types of things, when we run ads, we can send them to a more direct kind of page. Not only can that help your ads and just, again, the performance of those, you can also see just the user experience increase. The more specific you are with a page and the content you're giving me as a user that's searching on Google, the better your, as the business owner, opportunity is of me selecting you because it correlates much more with my search query. And that's ultimately why we talk about having multiple pieces of content and writing, again, for instance, we might write about some of the locations that are on for our business. We're going to write about the different services, the different products, the product categories, all of those things, but it really kind of starts with that content. So to really kind of look at it at a recap, again, SEO is like having a long-term business relationship with Google. If that's the one thing you're going to take away that. But when we get into SEO, remember, we start with the content. We want to start with the core piece of content on our site, which a lot of times is our service pages and our product or product category pages. That's that foundational piece, the initial, again, relationship building efforts by you to say, hey, here I'm creating all this content that you can utilize for your users to make you look like a rock star. But also, while I'm doing that, I'm communicating what I do, who I do it for, and where I do it to Google. Then we obviously can start to move on for ongoing SEO, which can be, those blogs that we're writing, doing video creation, even posting on social media, getting reviews, creating and posting more pictures. All of those things we're continuously pretty much beating Google over the head with continuously reminding them what we do. But the more content we give Google, the better, again, our relationship is going to increase and the better they're going to trust us. And then, of course, again, going to some of the Google tools of analytics, Search Console, again, if we're running Google ads, looking at the benefit there that we kind of have. So this is all a way to kind of get started with that. I know it's a lot of kind of information to kind of go, but these are the places that you need to obviously understand what's happening with SEO, what's happening with Google, and ultimately kind of where do we kind of begin. And it starts with that keyword research and getting those core keywords set, and then implementing that into your content, and also then creating more content. So with that said, I want to open it up to questions. So again, reminder, put them in the kind of chat here. We've already got a couple questions, and I'll kind of go ahead and read those. So we've got a question here from Jason that says, any tips to boost the number of positive reviews we get on sites like Google, Facebook, Nextdoor, and Yelp? So really, again, the best way to kind of increase, reviews is to make it easy for people to leave your reviews. And if you want to say to increase the number of positive reviews, it does, what we a lot of times find, is we can all say this from, again, just human nature, is that people are much more adept and, again, willing to take time out of their day to complain about something than a lot of times to compliment something. So the reason I say that, Jason, is a lot of times, again, unsolicited, you'll of course get a lot of bad reviews that way. But how you can start to do better ones is, again, I would recommend either on your invoicing, on your thank you emails, on your website, if you have a texting kind of platform, make sure you have a very as easy as the way you can possibly do a direct link to leave a review for Google, to leave a review for Facebook. Don't just tell someone, hey, can you go leave us a review on Google? They've got to search for you. They've got to find you. They've got to do all that kind of stuff. Google, within Google My Business, has a direct link that you can literally copy. It not only takes them to your Google My Business page on, again, Google Maps, it actually opens up the review thing. And all they have to do is click and they can start writing a review. Same thing with Facebook. You can take them to the review tab. They can click on writing a review. Same thing with Yelp, Nextdoor. So again, create those links, put those into places that you're going to see positive customers, if that's via texting, your invoicing, your thank you email, whatever it may be. But that's probably your best way to kind of do that. We have another question here that says, my website is on Squarespace. They have analytics. Is that integrated with Google Analytics or different? Fantastic question. It's actually different, and you absolutely should be utilizing both. And here's why. Google Analytics is essentially like a third party that's not connected to any CMS, which means content management system. What a CMS is WordPress is a CMS. Joomla, Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, all those are just different types of websites. We call them CMS systems. The thing with Google Analytics is it's almost bipartisan. It sits here and it doesn't matter. If you only use Squarespace's, if you only use Shopify's analytics, if you only use, again, Weebly's analytics, what happens is maybe in 5 years down the road, when you decide to upgrade your site and you move to another platform, you just lost all of that data because you cannot take that with you. Also, all of those other platforms aren't going to be able to touch the amount of level and analytics and stats that Google is going to be giving you. So yes, you can still look at Squarespace's analytics, but you absolutely need to install Google Analytics separately and be able to have both, and you can have both essentially running. So I got another question that says, I've requested reviews from past clients. They say they have left them, even sent me screenshots, but I cannot see them on my end. You might just want to check. Sometimes it does take a few days. Also, again, that might be an issue you might have to take up with the platform. There might be a glitch. There's no silver bullet that I'm going to be able to tell you on why reviews won't be showing. Again, that's more of a technology platform issue. You could be, again, like if you've done something nefarious, which I'm not assuming you have, but I'm saying there's so many different issues that can, again, that can essentially cause that. But you can submit a ticket to Google. You can, again, it's not as easy, but Facebook, there are some ways that you can do, and there's some support forums. But unfortunately, you have to go that route in order to kind of see it, because there can be a lot of technical issues that can sometimes happen. I've just seen where Google is a glitch. We submit a support ticket. They're like, no, we're seeing them too, and tell them you can't. They refresh the system and it can kind of work. Sometimes you'll find out, well, this is what we're kind of seeing, and this is why that review may not have kind of shown. You may not always get the answers you want, but unfortunately, I won't be able to tell you why, and there's no really one good reason why that would happen. So, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you guys took something away. If you guys do have a question about, again, either the services that Skoll Marketing offers, or a question about SEO or just digital marketing in general, I encourage you, again, to reach out. There's my direct email. There's my phone number. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Another thing we do beyond just giving these presentations as a way to give back to our community is we also do free, again, consultations. This isn't a sales pitch. Again, if you want to talk about our services, awesome, would love to do that. But I also do understand that sometimes we just need a little bit more one-on-one help, or a little bit more kind of direction when I've got to teach these in classroom style. So I encourage you guys to take advantage of that. Like I said, there's no obligations. It's just a way that we kind of give back. If you're ever interested in one of those sessions, simply just reach out via email, and I'd be more than happy to set up one of those, again, no obligation kind of consultations. Otherwise, I encourage you guys also to check out our, again, website at skollmarketing.com. You can see our workshops page, as well as if you want to see all of our other topics on demand, we also record at least all of our topics and have them on our YouTube channel, which obviously for free, and you can actually then watch and listen to those anytime you want. So between, the free consultations, the different workshops that we're doing live that you're experiencing now, as well as our YouTube channel, and even our blogging that we do and our social media content, we're here to be a resource for you. So I hope you guys took away something. I hope that we can be of help in the future if you guys need something. But thank you guys for tuning in, and Skoll.